I'd like to do a follow-up to my last video in terms of language and sort of definitions versus functional uses. Definitions ideally are supposed to illustrate functional use, but often lag behind the curve. Now, there are certain words out there, certain phrases I should say, that I would technically agree with based on definition, but not based on usage. For example, the phrase virtue signaling is commonly thrown around. And ironically, I think that actual virtue signaling is something that should be more of a concern to the people who are being quote-unquote signaled for. But more to the point, the definition of virtue signaling as is used by people when they're trying to explain it is generally something along the lines of making a facile point to improve one's standing within a certain circle of people. The functional usage, however, is usually more a issue of who I agree with and who I disagree with. And if somebody disagrees with you, if they're a dreaded social justice warrior, then they must be virtue signaling because, it's not possible that people actually care. Based on the stated definition of virtue signaling, I would actually agree. There are a bunch of people out there who do virtue signal a lot. The problem is that I see it used as the first line of defense, to the point that I am frequently accused of virtue signaling on LGBT issues. It can't possibly be that I actually have skin in the game and might care. No, I'm part of some conspiracy to just look good. Like, I would be okay with LGBT treatment, including myself, if only I didn't have to look good in front of other people who say the same things. And on that note, the concept of a social justice warrior has been described multiple ways, but the most frequent way I've seen it described is very similar to the idea of virtue signaling. People who will fight a fight just to fight it, not because they actually care about the people involved. Except that's used on basically everyone. This is not to say that the only people who do it are the quote-unquote other side. The so-called social justice movements and feminists often do the same thing. If you call everyone a Nazi, you end up devaluing the concept of Nazis to the point that it doesn't really have any value when leveled against white supremacists and anti-Semites and people who are actually preaching genocide. If everybody's a Nazi, then it doesn't matter. And if you only use Nazi as person I disagree with, there's a problem. Similarly, I dislike the term TERF, trans-exclusionary radical feminist, not because it isn't a thing, but because it's applied so broadly that it doesn't necessarily actually apply to radicals or feminists. There do exist trans-exclusionary radical feminists. It's just that it is leveled in such a way that you don't actually have to be a feminist, and I'm not saying that in terms of, well, you're not a true feminist because no true Scotsman. I'm saying that in terms of people who ardently state that they are not feminists, who oppose feminism even sometimes, can be called TERFs. And that's just stupid. All of these terms technically have uses, accurate applications, and real people that they impact. And yet, we use them as snarl words for people we want to vilify, people we disagree with. I think bad actors should be called out. I think insincere people should be called out. And it's kind of tempting to go into people on my own side I think are insincere because, on the other hand, I don't want this video to be 15 freaking minutes long, so I'm going to skip that. But when you reduce these arguments to buzzwords, then really all you're doing is trying to win an argument. And when it comes to issues like the ones these come up in, nobody really wins when that happens. And in the end, isn't that in itself virtue signaling? Thanks for listening. Amaranth out.